Hey everyone, welcome to a very, very, very special edition of Garden Gab. I am so excited to be joined by one of my greatest inspirations and friends, Brie Arthur. Thank you so much for joining us today so we can talk all about planting. So, Brie, why don't you give a little background on yourself, where you live, and then we're going to get into some fun projects and plants that you're working with.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. This is exciting. So, my name is Brie Arthur, also known as Bree the Plant Lady, and I'm a professional horticulturist and author. And I live in Zone 7, Raleigh, North Carolina. But I'm originally from southeastern Michigan. So, I did grow up in Zone 5, and I studied landscape design at Purdue, which is even colder than where I grew up in Michigan. So I'm well versed with growing in different climates, but I have been here in the kind of the triangle area of the central North Carolina region. It'll be 20 years in May.
Oh my gosh. So you moved there when you were like 3.
I love that he says that. Yes. I came as an intern, and I was so fortunate that I had this experience working as an estate gardener. And of all of the jobs that I've had in this green industry, the basis of understanding how to manage a large property efficiently is probably the most important thing now that I communicate to other home gardeners so that you can maximize your enjoyment and, just better understand long-term management. I try not to use the word maintenance because it sort of conjures up something undesirable. My background also after estate managing or after estate gardening, I worked in ornamental plant production. So I was at Plant Delights as production manager, growing crazy cool perennials. And then most recently at Camellia Forest, where I really found like what makes my heart sing with trees and shrubs. But I have yet to find a plant that I didn't love, at least one that isn't invasive.
Yeah.
So I'm just generally a plant nerd. I'm not necessarily well adjusted. You know that.
Well, when we met, oh god, like 8, 9 years ago now, it was probably around the time that your first book was coming out, and I remember having conversations with you. This was Foodscape Revolution time, right? That was probably the first
Yes.
book that we were talking through, and I just thought it was such a cool concept that wasn't talked about enough, that, like, you can grow edibles on your property and not just like have a tomato in a pot, but build it into your landscape design and have it complement the other flowering trees and shrubs and perennials in the landscape.
It's such a simple concept. And I often giggle when I think about naming the book because it shouldn't be revolutionary to grow some food that you eat. But we're kind of living in a time where that isn't ordinary. And, since I bought my first house in the suburbs, I've been navigating homeowner associations. And that can be a real challenge. It can be very intimidating. And if you do something wrong, it can be very expensive. So
Mhm.
I wanted to use my experience to help empower other people who have an interest in growing vegetables and to do it in a way that doesn't make their neighbors mad so that everybody can benefit from the gardening experience. And that was really the motivation behind writing that, is just to kind of break down some of the misconceptions about vegetable gardening. The bottom line is ornamental plants need exactly the same stuff as vegetables. You need sun, you need water, you need fertilizer, you need good soil. So if you're going to put forth the effort to grow ornamental plants, why not grow some vegetables that you like to eat right alongside?
Well, and then from that went into gardening with grains, and I just like, and granted, being a zone 4 gardener, just like drooling and being so jealous of everything you can do, but like just watching the pictures and like how your landscape changed throughout the year with that, the mixture of the grains and your ornamentals, it's just so cool because like they are ornamental in their own respect. And that's one of the things that I love about following you, is that you get to see the beauty of it while also then learning about like brewing beer and like harvesting stuff with the neighbor kids too.
Well, that's the whole idea. I want it to be immersive. Like, I think gardening is the greatest way you could possibly spend time. And, the nice thing about it being a hobby is you're never finished, right? There's always something more to be done.
Mhm.
And what I love about ornamental horticulture is the permanence of it. You can count on those plants. But it's really nice to have seasonal annuals that change your space up. And I to say that I love grains is like a massive understatement. I mean, I am the crazy grain lady. And it turns out I'm the only person in the world that wants to use that hashtag. I'm not sure what that says about me, but it's true.
But it's worth checking out that hashtag because it is so fun to like follow all the things you're doing, especially if you have zone envy like I do. So you talk about like the evolution of the landscape and how this is like an ongoing project. So the other thing that I'm really excited to follow with you is you have a big new project at home. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
I am so excited. Like, I'm irrationally excited. So, you mentioned my garden helpers. They were my neighbors for almost 10 years, and they moved just a little bit south. Don't worry, they ride the school bus here every day. So, I get 2 hours of gardening with them. So, even though they don't live next door, I still see them on the regular. But we decided to go ahead and purchase their home, and it's a blank slate. It's a full sun, nothing planted yard that, I mean, I literally kind of feel like I start going into hot flashes when I think about it because I'm so excited. Um, it's just a huge opportunity to be able to show other people through all this new digital content now that I wasn't doing when I built this garden, how to construct a garden from scratch, ground up. How do you design it? What are your considerations? Do you need irrigation? How do you build your beds? How do you decide what plants to include? Like, I am so excited to get to share this experience with everybody because I think, it'll be something that everyone can benefit from, including myself, because I will inevitably make mistakes along the way. And it's just such a great opportunity to be able to do something different and grow some new plants.
Mhm.
My garden's 11 years old now, and I clearly need more land. There's been a lot of new plant introductions in 11 years, especially from first editions.
Well, I think there's a couple things in there. One, that talking about failure and like things not working, I think that's a really important thing that I like to talk about. Like sometimes you're gonna plant something and it just doesn't work, and that's okay. And it's an opportunity to try something different. And like, of course, there's a cost impact and all that that goes into it, but you got to try and play a little bit. And when things don't work, you gotta like shuffle it off and like let's find something cool that can work now. So I think that's a really important piece of like doing this design process, like not being too scared to play a little bit, right?
Well, I am really excited that the NC State design class is actually using this property for their project. So I'm actually going to get six other people's perspectives on designing it. They came a few days ago and interviewed me and took the measurements and walked through my current property to see what works and what doesn't. And I was like, I'm over the moon about having other people's perspectives, and so excited to engage college students in this because they've never built a garden before. So, and
So when you're
frankly,
like when you're starting this process, what are some of the things that you're thinking about?
well, number one, what's the exposure? In this case, the front yard is east facing. So it's a blank slate, it's full sun, but east facing is different than west facing. So the front yard is going to, in theory at least, get at least some shade, structural shade from the house. Otherwise, there's not a drop of shade on this half acre lot. It's also all sand. We live in a former tobacco field. And I remember the day, January 3rd, 2011, when I told the landscaper that I liked to drag hoses and I did not need an irrigation system for my current garden. And that was one of the stupidest things I've ever said. So this property will have an irrigation system, if for no other reason to make it so you can access water not just attached to your house. Um, I'm always trying to learn from my mistakes, and I make lots of mistakes. Um, but irrigation was like a top priority. It was, especially when I start traveling again, my poor husband will be the one that is left trying to keep everything watered.
And David is a very good sport, but, like, he's got his stuff to do as well.
Exactly. If there's an opportunity to do some automation, it's good to go ahead and plan that from the beginning because there is an economic relationship to there. I mean, putting in an irrigation system is one of your bigger investments. But in the long haul, I think it does lead to, well, I think it leads to happiness. I've never had an irrigation system in my life. So,
I know. I've got a new house that I'm planting as well and basically starting from scratch, and with the terrible heat and drought that we had last summer, that we're like, this spring that might have to be the time for us to just put the money in and do it too, so we don't end up with, you know, things fail in the landscape, and like we said, that's fine, but if it's something like that where it's gonna be a perpetual issue, then we gotta tackle it right away.
well, and that's important to remember. Here in the Southeast, we are hot and often dry in the summer, and you have to water even established plants.
Yeah.
So make it convenient. I always say, like, really take into consideration how much time and energy you have so that I don't ever want a garden to feel like a chore or a
Mhm.
task. I get great joy when I walk outside, and when I'm outside, I don't ever call it work, it's play.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said about dragging hoses in August when it's like 150,000 degrees outside. So,
Then it gets close to work. So,
yeah.
I think, like, some of the infrastructure things help with, like, keeping it play, but then some of it is plant choice too, and picking things you know are gonna work for your zone, for the exposure, soil type, and, you and I have talked a little bit about plants for your landscape, and, like, especially since you do have that blank slate, starting with some structure. So, what are some of the things that you are thinking about putting in to your completely new yard?
Well, first, let me show you all the tabs that I have in my first editions catalog. So, first, and whenever I do a design, I kind of do a plant list based off of what function does the plant provide. So, is it evergreen structure? Is it flowering? Is it edible? Is it drought tolerant? So, my first category always is evergreen structure. Conifers, broadleaf evergreens, things that are going to provide the bones so that year round, no matter what is going on with annuals and perennials, there's something that's visually stimulating. And of course, abelias are, I'm going in alphabetical order. I'm revealing my obsessive compulsive disorder. Uh, on that list. I love abelia because you can grow them as a hedge. They don't really need to be clipped really tightly because I prefer kind of the natural look, but you can grow them tight and, kind of create I'm not a knot garden, but I am very inspired by some of the European, like 17th century design
Yeah.
strategies. I fail at managing that because I don't like using hedge clippers. But that's why a plant like Abelia is so great because, it flowers, it attracts, butterflies and hummingbirds and bees, and it'll provide that bone that I need that, when everything else is dormant, that stays looking
Mhm.
amazing. Of course, garden were another that the varieties of gardenia in the first editions line are really top quality. And so, again, I want that for the structural element that they provide, in addition to the amazing fragrance that, we get
That's
to
one
have. As
those
gardening
of
is
us in zone
sensory.
4, we've got that zone envy. We're like, maybe we can put it in a pot on our patio for like a season and treat it as an annual because that gardenia fragrance is just like you can't replicate it anywhere else.
It's sort of iconic to the Southeast. I always say, like, a Southern garden's not complete without a gardenia and a camellia. Of course, I'm a camellia lady. A native plant that I'm really stoked to grow that I don't have in my current collection is Cephalanthus. And fiber optics is the coolest.
Well,
I've
and that's
seen
just one
this
of those plants
growing.
that works hard. Like if you've got a place in the yard that's has wet feet or like stays wet late into spring, we've got some planted at my dad's house that we have fiber optics planted that literally until almost May is standing water and they thrive there. So it's like it's one of those plants that has that really cool like flower on it, but also like does a lot of work for you in a place that typically things are just going to die off.
I'm so happy you told me that, because this is actually a 100-year floodplain that we live in, and we flood on a regular basis. In fact, often, like, the backyards of these properties are soggy for 4 or 5 months of the year. So now I know exactly where Cephalanthus is
Yeah.
going to go.
Yeah, it's used a lot in wetland restoration. One, because it likes wet feet, and two, because when it turns to seed, it is edible for waterfowl. So it's like one of those things that like just checks all these boxes that you wouldn't necessarily go to a garden center and be like, oh, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen and pick it up. It's one of those that like you have to know about a little bit first, but it does all these really cool things for not only for the landscape, but for the other inhabitants that we have in our yards.
Oh, well, and I know I've seen that your plant, the first editions plant, growing at the Ralston Arboretum, completely covered with swallowtail butterflies.
Yes.
So, like, basically I will do anything for butterflies. It's a no-brainer, right? Now, another plant that I'm really keen to include are the distiliums. And I've had a lot of experience growing these. Over the years, you've been shipping me varieties to trial, and they grow in some of the toughest conditions. In fact, I have three cultivars around the base of a water oak, which is possibly the driest place on the planet Earth, and they don't even skip a beat. And I don't ever irrigate it. They look perfect. They're beautiful evergreen, and for us, they're just starting to flower right now, and they're really, really good. Cut the branches, bring them in to have additions to your flower arrangements, and they last for like 3 weeks as a cut. So I don't ever prune them until they start to bloom, and then I prune them just for the purpose of making flower arrangements.
That's another one of those. It's just like a cool new plant, and especially in areas where boxwood blight is such a problem, Distillium has this natural resistance to pests and disease, and so it's been used a lot in the Southeast as replacements, either hedged. I just saw at Auburn they have this really cool vintage jade hedge that they trim, and it looks so cool. But a lot of them have these beautiful like arching branches, so you can use them almost as ground covers. Some of the lower growing ones like swing low, so it's just a cool new plant, and it's really new in the United States, really in the last 10, 15 years. So it's one of those things that you can put in your yard and show off to friends and be like, you bet you have no idea what this is.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I remember when you all were first introducing these, and it was a genera that no one had ever heard of.
Yeah.
And I love that in 10 years' time you have normalized it. It's been completely accepted with open arms by the landscape industry and
Yep.
by home gardeners, because it's a knockout plant.
Yeah, it really is. It's one of those again. we try and put plants into this collection that, just like I said with the button bush, are hardworking, because we want people to go and play in the garden, not feel like they have to go work. And if you put things in that you have to really work towards to get like that ultimate dream result, it's just you're not going to want to go do it. You're not going to want to put more things in the ground. And at the end of the day, we all want people to go dig in the dirt a little bit more. And so try and find plants that are, I don't like using the word easy, because you want to, we want people to engage with the landscape, but aren't ones that you're going to have to spend all of this time just trying to make them survive. And so between the button bush and the distillium and so many of the others, that we can make it a fun and enjoyable experience to engage with the garden, that's what we're going for.
Well, I always say if you need to get your feelings hurt, you grow an heirloom tomato. If you want to feel like a rock star, grow a hydrangea paniculata.
Yes. Exactly. Set it, forget it, and just like enjoy that beautiful fall color.
Now, I like to combine the two and use the structural integrity of the hydrangea paniculata to grow the tomato up in, and no one even knows that you're growing a tomato. And then your neighbors will ask how you got your hydrangea to produce fruit.
Tips and tricks from Bree.
The magic of foodscaping.
Well, that's a perfect way to wrap this up, and like so perfectly encapsulates well, one of the many reasons that I love you. Um, this has been so much fun. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As I mentioned, you've got to follow Bree, because she's just so fun and has so many good things to share. So head to breegrows.com, check out her YouTube, her Instagram. She also is building a big library of content on the Aster community. So check out Aster, and you can follow along as she builds out this whole new landscape. And she'll give you tips and tricks for how you can do it at home, and how you can maybe incorporate some of these first edition shrubs and trees that we talked about as well. So thank you, Bree. I appreciate it so, so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me. I can't wait to start placing my plant orders.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next time on Garden Gab.